Copper is down more than 20% in just one day, and we're going to figure out why in this video. This is the daily chart of copper, and the last video I made, we were somewhere up here, and that video was more focused on the demand of copper. This video will focus more on the supply of copper. And the news that we have today is that on Wednesday, Trump had announced a 50% tariff on copper. And this was sooner than expected. So if there's a tariff on copper, right, which is basically a tax on any imports of copper, that would increase the price of copper, right? So why is copper down? Yeah, so that seems a bit counterintuitive. But to explain why, going into this, we were expecting these tariffs to happen, and we can see there was this rise up in the previous few weeks, and especially this one big spike here. So there was a large expectation that there would be copper tariffs coming on. And what's happened is that these companies have imported lots and lots of copper. In fact, almost 100,000 tons since July 8th. So the country is full of copper. And we were doing this in the expectation of those tariffs, so everyone wanted to get their copper in now. Now, the big deal with this is that the tariffs that were placed are less than what was expected. So we had this run-up in the price of copper based on the expectation of certain tariffs. And then the tariffs did come, but the tariffs were less than expected. And so now we see the market is down more than 20% in let's pull up the 5-minute chart. Here is when the announcement was made about 2 o'clock yesterday. We can see this huge 5-minute bar. So most of the selling occurred immediately. Initially there was this tail on top where the market actually rose maybe 5% or so. And let's go down to a 1-minute chart. We'll get even more in detail here. So on the 1 minute, we can see immediately there was actually quite a bit of buying, and two things could be happening. One, this was a trap by design. So the big hedge funds bought this up, trying to create lots of buyers up here, and that would create lots of volume for them to be able to sell and quickly push the market down with a huge profit. The other thing that might have happened is that computers saw the news that tariffs are going out on copper. And they knew there was an expectation of this, but still when that news hit and it said copper tariffs are being placed 50% on copper imports, then initially there might have been a lot of buying just from that shock the market saw. And that might have pushed the market up. So there were probably true buyers of this thinking that the price should be higher. And then there were possibly also people with a strategy of trying to buy it up so they could create volume and then to sell it off. Either way, we ended up much lower. Now, most of the selling did happen actually immediately. Look, I mean, these are 1-minute bars now. So in just 2 minutes, we were most of the way down. We did most of the 20% sell off in just 2 minutes. So that is, I mean, for a commodity as large as like copper, something that is in every component, in every house, that's huge selling to happen in just 2 minutes. That's maybe a 15% drop in 2 minutes of a huge important commodity like copper. So there we are. So we've kind of continued to sell off since then, and we're somewhere around this 4.3 level. So the market was expecting higher tariffs than what we got. A proclamation released by the White House said the tariff starting this Friday will apply only to pipes, tubes, and other semi-finished copper products. It left out copper ores, concentrates, and cathodes. We have this huge U.S. stockpile that might actually be re-exported. So the general idea here is that over the last few months, there has been a run-up in the price due to the expectation of tariffs. But then these tariffs are not as extreme as was expected. And then we're also stuck with this large inventory where we might need to become exporters of that inventory. And so now the prices are quickly rushed back to the prices that they were basically at the start of the year. So I was starting to think that the tariff news was kind of over and that it was no longer impacting the market. But in percentage terms, this is actually the largest change that we've seen in a market so far, basically. So we are not out of it yet. The tariffs are still very impactful to the market, at least to certain markets. So I'm glad I'm able to talk about this because I think you can learn a lot from this event. It's right. If you see the copper tariffs coming out, you would think, oh, copper price is going to go up. But instead we go down, and we actually end up 20% down in 2 minutes. And I assume that's the largest drop copper's ever had. I don't know if there's another event that caused a 20% change in 2 minutes. But the big lesson is that whatever you're trading, you really need to be a master and be fully focused on what you're trading. So someone was fully focused on the copper market, and they had a full understanding of how copper moves through economies, how it's imported and exported and used in those economies. And they were on top of the tariff news. Well, then they might be able to understand how this recent tariff that came out would impact the market. And they could have made all sorts of different plays in the last few months as these tariffs are coming out. Now, someone that's not paying attention to it and does not really have that great understanding of copper would not really have any edge on copper. Even if they saw the news and they were able to click their button quick, they might be on the wrong side of it. So think about it. If let's say you're just trading stocks, what's better if you just generally trade any kind of stock that kind of comes along, or if you're like an expert on airlines and you fully understand all the intricacies of the airline business, who's doing better, then when certain news events come out, there might be an initial wrong reaction because they just see the news and they don't really understand it fully, but it looks like news where they maybe should buy. But actually you understand it, and it's actually a time to sell because of that. And so by you becoming the expert or the master at one certain thing, then you'll have those opportunities where you actually have a huge edge. So definitely an interesting news event, and I'm glad I could cover it for you.